First of all, I hope that the people attending are about business model because I saw on the brochure there was a mistake. It's not about 3D printing. I know about 3D printing, but not enough to talk about 20 minutes. So that's the start. So maybe a quick introduction about myself and IBM, and maybe you're asking why IBM is actually in this forum for construction. Because actually we are busy since an amount of years focusing on services, and we are out of the hardware business. We're getting further and further away from the selling hardware business model towards selling services. And basically focusing on different industries, how can we get value and leverage insights out of all the data that we are collecting. Was it in the automotive industry with smart vehicles? Was it in the healthcare industry with Watson and oncology? Or was it in construction, which I will talk a bit more about? So we have actually global center of competence around the topic of circular economy because we believe data and technology is a key enabler for the circular economy and for reuse. And we actually started focusing around two industries, electronics, because this is our home base where we started in the beginning producing mainframes, servers, computers. But we are also focusing since a year and a half on the construction industry. How can we help enable reuse and circular economy in the construction industry? Actually, it's the only global center of competence we have based in the Netherlands, and the rest is usually in the US, and that's an area where we believe there is a strategic growth. So just to, you probably heard all the trends. We will not spend lots of time on it before on this occasion, but we're seeing one of the reasons we engage on that topic is that we're seeing various trends that are really important for around reuse and understanding better what's in your buildings. One of the trends is, of course, you have the urbanization, where we have a big amount of people, big percentage, close to 75% being in cities by 2050. You have changing requirements. You see in China, the buildings, the building profile is changing. While we had a big focus on manufacturing industries, you see that now the labor cost in China is also getting higher, where it's moving to services industry, which means already a different type of spaces, a different type of buildings. What do you do with all these buildings that were rebuilt, that were built already? That comes the repurposing aspect. We see, of course, also the big amount of waste, where raw materials constitute by far the largest portion of materials used in all industries, but also in terms of waste. So all these different trends, next to legislation that is being changed, especially in Europe, made us take a closer look. How can we use technology with the right business model approach and the right ecosystems to show that there is value for different actors and new business models that can be created? So we saw that the economy is crippled today. I mean, we have a slow-growing economy, and the traditional efficiency improvements are not helping anymore. So we started looking into how can we really unlock value out of a big asset that we have, which is all these buildings we have in cities, talking about urbanization. And we believe that one of the key barriers or key enablers, whatever way you want to look at it, is understanding what's in your cities and understanding what are the key ecosystems that should form together to get value out of materials in buildings or components or products. So what we call the concept of urban mining. And we see that actually to transition from a model where we are really dependent on virgin resources to a model where indeed, as Hein was speaking before me and Helma, cities become buildings as material banks. There are various capabilities that I will talk about in the next 15 minutes. But one of the key capabilities is data, is understanding what's in your city, what's in your buildings. How are they connected with each other? How can you deconstruct them? All this are information that we didn't traditionally collect, but we were seeing traditionally that we need to, gradually that we need to know more. So I will tell you a few words about our business model and our electronics industry and make the analogy to construction, because this is where we can learn also a lot. I mean, like I said, at IBM, we used to have a turnover of out of our total turnover, about 35% was of hardware about 15 years ago. Now we are less than 10%. we really moved to a model of cloud as a service, but also insights as a service. How can you leverage new insights, valuable insights, generate new business model out of data? And at the same time, one of the examples I can give is that about 90% of our products are leased, which means we already get them back, the mainframe servers, if we focus on the mainframe servers. And we have actually a unit that was created 25 years ago at IBM called GARS, which is the Global Asset Recovery Services. And basically, it's a $2 billion per year revenue business with healthy margins, with only objective is to recover our IT assets worldwide and refurbish, remanufacture, and harvest components and material out of it. And we realized actually through a project we did 2 years ago within GARS, just by having more visibility what's in your product and how easy it is to take it apart and how easy it is to upgrade it, knowing your asset base all over the world, we can already save millions and millions of euros through internalizing our supply chain. So we were taking actually components out of our returned products to use them in our new products. Under our terms and conditions, if you buy a new product, you can have refurbished components, which is also in line with the business model of selling as a service. You don't care as a client if it's refurbished component in your product or not. You care for the performance. You care for you want the guarantee that it works. And we saw that when we created the passport and the Insight reuse system out for our IT product, it gave us already lots of potential for savings, but also new revenue streams. Can we be a supplier from our electrical component to another IT company? And this is where you start the exchange of components within a whole industry. And why not actually an old processor from a laptop going to a lighting system, which doesn't need a very strong, powerful processor? You start seeing across industries also the symbiosis. Now, as you can see, in a building, we have even a more complex system. And if you move even to a city, so a building is also a consolidation of so many different industries together, from your cement to all the different suppliers to your electronics. And how can you really map this building and capture what's in it and what are the potential repurposing option or reuse option within this building? So actually, we said, let's zoom out, and this is in link to the Building as Material Banks project that we are working with different partners. Let's zoom out and try to understand that ecosystem. It's not about proving the value or proving the concept for one particular company or one particular product. Why don't we make a proof of concept or a proof of value for a business network, a small ecosystem, which will summarize all these actually actors that are key to make reuse viable, but also where you will see that new business models are being created. So we distinct 4 key phases in the construction industry, from the design, of course, and engineering, to the build, to your usage, and operation of the building, and of course the repurposing, which often was the demolition companies. And you see that the design phase, of course, is critical to collect all the requirements, starting from the requirements of the person that will use the building. Do you want a healthy, productive environment with the optimal lighting, optimal acoustics? What about the requirements for the repurposing option? How can an urban miner maximize the effectiveness of their work to capture more value? And as a simple analogy here, we have it at IBM. Our GARS, the people who work at GARS, our asset recovery services, have also a common person which is sitting in design to give feedback continuously about what are the design changes that needs to happen to maximize the value out of reuse. And that shows also the alignment between design phase and repurposing phase. But also we realized that in design, the traditional design and engineering and architecture, it's not about only your architect and your engineer. Because you also need early on to collect data and document it in the right format, the right structure, where it can be harvested along the way. So if you want to capture all the services and actually the value out of the use phase and the operate phase, you need to make sure that you put the right sensors early on to, for example, measure the right air quality, to measure the lighting, to measure the acoustics. And this is something which we achieve also by having almost like a digital architect, which is part of your design team and architecture team early on. Buildings today are not just your physical static asset. Buildings are dynamic environments where you need to cope and adapt to the user, and you need to cope and adapt to the requirements that might change in 5 years or 10 years. You don't know, you build today, but you don't know what's coming in 10 years. Another example of the ecosystem, which is interesting, you suddenly start seeing, and I will come to an example of another project we're working on now with another construction company, but actually you start seeing that it's not your traditional ecosystem of your builder and your demolition company and your architects. You start seeing that banks, insurance companies starts to get interested. Think of a building which has a healthier indoor air because of the design and choice of material. Maybe people who work there might have a lower insurance premium for their health because you know it's a healthier environment. Or banks could adapt also their mortgage offerings based on if it's a building which is easier to repurpose because the reuse potential is higher. So suddenly you start seeing new business models and new value proposition being created out of enabling of a building which is designed and prepared for reuse. I will talk about the capabilities that we see across different industries are key for enabling a circular economy. Was it in the scope of a particular company, or was it in the scope of an ecosystem? And I will touch upon about another interesting project that we're also working on actually with BAM, Royal BAM, which is also present here. We see 5 key capabilities to enable really a business model for reuse. The first one is product design is very important. We have criteria within IBM. New products cannot leave and be released to the market if they don't meet a certain percentage of remanufacturing potential. Because we see it as a part of our strong value proposition. If you're paying 10 million euro for a server and you tell the person buying it that after 3 years there's a possibility to upgrade it from N-1 to an N technology, that's a stronger protection for their investment. Or if we are selling it as a service, it's also better for us because we can also maximize the value out of these assets. But also if you think, of course, within the building, you see that the changing requirements will enable you also with your product design to adapt to these changing requirements. But the modularity also, if you're going to get out the stuff out of it, how easily connected are all these components. Reuse operations, you also see that now it's starting to be more specialized. You have your recycling technologies getting more and more specialized. How can you get out these precious metals out of electronics? It changed a lot the last few years. But also your remanufacturing. We see also within electronics, the value of remanufacturing is increasing actually tremendously because we are seeing that a smart design can really boost the value and boost the value proposition for the people that are, for the companies that are selling it. Reverse management, you have to set up your whole reverse logistics network, not just the execution. How do you manage a network of, for example, within IBM 12 centers worldwide to get back this product? Or you can think in a city, how can you really create an environment where there is some key players ensuring the deconstruction, but also the transport of all these materials that were mined. The business model of solutioning and selling, like I said, we are selling services. We are moving gradually towards selling cloud services, insight services. But what about also within the building industry with our client? We're also seeing more the people flow. We're working with Kone about moving to a people flow business, but also within some of their elevators moving to transport as a service, not selling a lift, selling a vertical transport service. How can you adapt to these business models and also viewing the legislation? And last but not least is actually our intelligence center for capturing all the data and really making decisions based on all this data. And here we see different layers. So Hein was presenting the material passport before me. This is a foundational step, which is important. But of course, on its own and standalone is not enough. The key here is to connect to all your other systems, to your BIM system, to connect to your maintenance system, to connect to your manufacturing catalogs. How can you pull all this data? And we actually started an interesting project with Royal BAM not long ago, where together we're aiming to create a reuse platform for the reuse industry also in Europe. So how can we really enable, with a small proof of concept, which will grow hopefully with an ecosystem, which is also, there are similarities with the Building as Material Banks project, which is going on the research longer term. How can we start showing quick successes for an ecosystem of a reuse platform for the construction industry? And this is where you start appreciating that to match supply and demand for somebody, an architect who wants to start a new project, instead of buying a new products or new material, can you ensure a quick visibility for what is available in the area around, what kind of quality can I expect, how easy it is to deconstruct, what kind of price. All this, if you make it visible and transparent, but also reliable, so the certifications are there, you ensure scaling up reuse to industry level. Because we've seen, of course, lots of pilot, but how can you bring the barrier to the next level? And the next layer after creating that platform, of course, you can argue, how can you optimize? How can you make the building smart enough, not just through energy efficiency, but smart enough to also give suggestions about the optimal reuse? Because you can think about it, when we get back an MRI, when we get back a server or a mainframe, there are also different options. Do we remanufacture? Do we refurbish? Do we harvest components? Or do we recycle the material? To be able to make the right decision, you need to analyze lots of different data. And this is what we're trying to replicate also in the construction industry, to also serve new business model like the urban miner role, with your demolition company becoming the urban miner, because they know more what to expect, what quality to expect. They know more at which quantity, which timeline. And that will also actually start creating a new supply chain or a new supply network where supply of materials, of components is enhanced, where data is key and visibility is key. So I think that's what I wanted to share with you today. If there are, I'm not sure if I'm on time or if there are questions, from room for questions.
For questions, maybe time for one question. Is there someone who likes to pose a question to Jad? Nobody. Thank you very much for your presentation, Jad. And now we will gaan we verder met